The night Amy Slayton finally opened her Instagram app again, it felt like the world had been holding its breath for weeks. The quiet glow of her phone's screen lit up her face in the dim room, casting long shadows that stretched across the walls, shadows that had been gathering ever since the day everything started to fall apart. She hadn't planned to post anything. She hadn't planned to open the app at all. Every time she tried, the weight of the headlines, the speculation, the whispers online all pressed down on her chest like an invisible hand. Her name had been everywhere: blogs, TikToks, gossip pages, news outlets, and none of it felt real. None of it felt like her. But then she looked over at the little chaos happening on the living room rug. There was Gage, almost 4 years old, and already with that spark in his eyes, the spark she always prayed wouldn't dim with time or struggle. He was kneeling over his favorite toy truck, making engine noises that were far too deep for someone his age, completely lost in a world only toddlers can understand. And next to him was Glenn, chubby cheeks puffed out, tiny fingers clumsily holding a slice of pizza, sauce smeared across his face like war paint. He was 2 years old, but his presence filled the room like he had been alive forever. Both boys were wearing matching Casper outfits, little two-piece sets covered in the smiling ghost that somehow made everything feel a little lighter. Casper the friendly ghost, Amy thought. If only the world were filled with more friendly things lately. It was that moment, that ordinary, messy moment, one she feared might get lost in all the noise, that made her finally press upload. Not because she wanted attention. Not because she wanted to explain herself. Not because she was ready. But because she needed something pure to exist in the middle of all the chaos. Her boys. Her reality. Her reason. She uploaded one photo of Gage with his truck. She uploaded another of Glenn mid-chew, pizza dripping off the edge. And she hit post. No long caption.
No explanation.
Just letting people see the part of her life that still made sense. It was her first Instagram upload since the arrest. Since the zoo. Since the camel. Since the moment her world spun so fast, she couldn't tell if she was standing or falling. When she was taken into custody, the cameras came out faster than the handcuffs. People didn't see the dizziness, the confusion, the panic clawing at her throat. They didn't see the chaos happening inside her mind. All they saw was the surface. A headline, a mugshot, a viral moment that didn't feel human anymore. She had pleaded not guilty. She had sat in court with her hands shaking in her lap. And she had looked the judge in the eyes when the date was set, November 7th, and nodded like someone who had no choice but to face the storm head-on. 3 felonies. Possession charges. Child endangerment accusations she could barely even speak about without her voice breaking. No one knew the full story. Most people didn't want to. They just wanted something to point at. But now, looking at her boys on the carpet, oblivious to how heavy the world had become for their mother, Amy felt something flutter in her chest, something fragile, but still alive. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe both things lived in the same place. Her last post before this? One word, 2024. A caption that aged like irony. Back then, she had been celebrating Glenn's birthday, balloons everywhere, frosting smeared across chairs, and laughter, real laughter, echoing through the house. Back then, she thought the year would be simple, healing,
Fresh.
But instead, 2024 had become a series of storms she never saw coming. On TikTok, she pretended to be okay. She filmed her new haircut, smiling softly. She posted videos of the boys. She shared a tender selfie with her new man, someone who held her hand through all the noise and didn't let go. But Instagram? Instagram was where things hit harder, where people noticed more, where everything she posted became a headline within minutes. That's why posting these photos meant something. It meant she wasn't hiding. It meant she wasn't disappearing. It meant she still had a voice, even when she wasn't sure how loud it was anymore. And as she closed the app and set the phone down, Amy felt her heartbeat settle into a rhythm she hadn't felt in weeks. Her boys were still here. Her life was still moving forward. And no matter what happened in court, she still had pieces of herself worth fighting for. But while Amy was trying to rebuild her world in small ways across Kentucky, another storm was brewing. Tammy Slayton. Season 8. The feud. The trailer. The explosion waiting to happen. And Amy didn't know it yet, but the storm on Instagram was nothing compared to the one coming from her own family. Amy didn't even have time to breathe before the next wave of chaos rolled toward her. The Instagram post had barely been up for an hour when her phone started buzzing again, notifications pouring in one after another. Some were supportive. Some were cruel. Some were from people she hadn't spoken to in years. But one notification wasn't from Instagram at all. It was a text from her brother Chris. Just 3 words. Trailer dropped.
Call.
Amy stared at the screen for a long moment, her pulse kicking up. Of course the trailer had dropped. Of course it had to drop today. Of course it had to be the one thing she wasn't emotionally prepared for. She didn't call him. She didn't want to hear the tone in his voice, the worried one he used when he was trying to handle everyone else's drama at once. She didn't want to talk about the feud. She didn't want to hear him say, "Just let it go," or "It'll blow over," or "Tammy didn't mean it like that," because right now Amy wasn't sure if she could believe any of that.
Her phone buzzed again.
This time, a link. Chris had sent the trailer. Amy's stomach dropped. She knew she'd have to watch it eventually. But watching herself fall apart in real time, watching her own family's lowest moments turned into entertainment, it never got easier. She pressed play. The screen faded in with that dramatic TLC music, slow, heavy, like it was preparing viewers for a train wreck they couldn't turn away from. Then came voices, overlapping. Tammy's voice first, sharp, tired, honest in the way only she could be. "It feels like me and Amy were drifting apart. And I don't know how to fix it." Amy felt her throat tighten. She had known Tammy felt that way. She had even felt it herself. But hearing it said out loud, recorded, edited, broadcast, it hit harder. Then came the confessional shot. Tammy sitting in her interview chair, arms folded across her chest, eyes flicking away like she was trying not to cry. "She should be my best friend," Tammy said, quieter this time. Amy swallowed. Because once upon a time she was. The trailer cut quickly to Chris, looking exhausted, rubbing his temples as he talked to the camera. Every other word in the family group chat is an F-bomb. It's like watching 2 tornadoes collide. Amy winced. That part was true. Their fight, the fight, had happened on a Tuesday night, and it had torn through the family group chat like wildfire. There had been shouting. There had been name-calling. There had been things typed that no one could take back. And the worst part? Millions of people were about to watch it play out episode by episode. The trailer flashed to a scene of Chris standing between the 2 sisters, literally standing between them, trying to cool them down like a referee caught in a family war. "Families are supposed to pull together," he said gently, "not tear each other apart." Then came Amy in her confessional chair, eyebrows raised, voice sharp as a knife. "I'm not gonna sit here and have you feed me this bologna when I don't like bologna." Amy felt her face flush when she heard that line again. She remembered saying it, remembered how angry, how defensive, how exhausted she had been. She hadn't meant for it to go viral. She hadn't meant for it to become a punchline online. But now it was part of the trailer, part of the season, part of her story, whether she wanted it or not. The screen cut to Tammy again. "If Amy kept her mouth shut," Tammy snapped, "then so would I." Amy exhaled shakily. That one stung. Even now. The trailer shifted quickly after that, moving through scenes like flickering memories Amy wished she could forget. Amy's wedding planning. Brian's name being thrown into conversations he never asked to be part of. Tammy making comments about Amy's parenting, comments that had cut deep, deep enough that Amy could still feel the bruise in her chest. Then the line that would set the internet on fire. Tammy saying, "She's a deadbeat mom." Amy's breath hitched. Even though she had heard it before. Even though the fight had happened months ago. Even though Tammy had apologized later in private. Hearing it again, hearing it in the trailer, in front of the world, felt like someone pushing on a wound that never fully healed. The trailer shifted to Amy crying. Real tears, messy, raw, unfiltered. "I'm done," she said in the clip, voice breaking. "I'm just done." Watching yourself cry on camera was like being punched from inside your own body. Amy felt her chest constrict as she watched her past self crumble under pressure she had tried so hard to carry. And then the trailer pivoted, showing Tammy's loose skin surgery, her dramatic transformation, her first job interview at an animal shelter. Showing Amy's haunted venue wedding planning. Showing the Slayton sisters growing in different directions, pulled apart by life, love, wounds, and weight they weren't sure how to carry anymore. When the trailer ended, the room felt too quiet. Amy sat still, staring at the black screen of her phone, hearing nothing but the sound of her own heartbeat. It was all happening at once: the arrest, the court date, the parenting accusations, the feud, the new season, the trailer, the judgment, the whispers, the headlines, the reality that felt anything but real. And for a moment, Amy wasn't sure which fight she was supposed to deal with first. The fight in court? The fight with Tammy? Or the fight inside herself? The one that told her she wasn't enough, wasn't strong enough, wasn't built for this level of pressure? But one thing she did know: her life was about to get much, much harder before it got easier. And she wasn't walking into that storm alone. Not anymore. Not after everything she had survived. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that made every thought in Amy's head feel louder than it needed to be. She set her phone face down on the table, but it didn't help. The trailer was still playing in her mind on a loop, every tear, every argument, every wound ripped open again for the world to watch. She could feel her throat tighten as she leaned back in her chair. How many times could one person start over? How many times could she rebuild herself before her hands got too tired? A soft knock came from the living room. "Amy, you good?" It was Amanda, leaning against the doorway with her arms crossed, chewing gum like she always did when she sensed trouble. Amy didn't answer right away. Amanda walked closer, lowering herself onto the chair across from her. "Chris sent me the trailer," she said. "Saw your part." Amy let out a breath. "Yeah." Amanda nodded slowly.
"Yeah."
Silence hung between them. Thick, heavy, familiar. When Amy didn't speak, Amanda reached across the table and flicked her finger against the phone. "You know what your problem is?" Amanda said. "You actually care." Amy lifted her head, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you let people's words bury you," Amanda said.
Tammy's
"Fans on the internet. TLC editing. Everybody." She shook her head. "You let him crack you open every time." Amy swallowed. "Because it hurts." "I know it hurts," Amanda said gently. "I know it hurts worse when it's family." Amy blinked fast, fighting off the pressure behind her eyes. "But you," Amanda pointed at her chest, "you're tougher than you think. You ain't the same Amy from 5 years ago. You're raising 2 boys. You got a whole new life. You're rebuilding. You're surviving." Amy laughed bitterly. "Surviving doesn't feel like winning." Amanda raised a brow. "Sometimes surviving is winning." Amy looked away, her voice barely a whisper. "She called me a deadbeat mom." Amanda's jaw tightened. "And she regrets it. You know she does." Amy shook her head. "Doesn't matter. Once you say something like that, it sticks." Her voice cracked. "It stays in your brain. It sits in your chest. Even if they apologize." Amanda didn't argue, because she knew Amy was right. Some words didn't just hurt, they carved their own space inside you. Then Amanda leaned forward, softer this time. "Amy, you're not a deadbeat anything. You're a good mom. Better than good." She swallowed. "You're doing this alone, and you're still showing up for those boys. Every day." Amy felt her throat throb. No one saw what she carried behind closed doors. The weight, the guilt, the fear, the constant pressure of between one life and the next. Before either of them could speak again, Amy's phone buzzed, a notification lighting up the screen despite being face down. Amanda glanced at it first. "It's Tammy." Amy froze. Of course it was Tammy. This day wasn't done with her yet. Amanda held out the phone. "You want me to read it, or you want to do it?" Amy hesitated, then took it herself. She tapped the screen. Open the message. Already bracing for the worst. But it wasn't what she expected. Tammy had sent a voice note. Just 5 seconds long. Amy took a shaky breath and pressed play. Tammy's voice, soft, tired, wounded, filled the room. Amy, please call me. That was it.
No anger. No attitude.
No fight. Just
Tammy.
her sister. Her other half. The girl she grew up beside. The girl who used to braid her hair for school and share candy under the covers. Amy felt something twist in her chest. She looked at Amanda, voice trembling. She sounds scared. Amanda nodded once.
Yeah, she does.
What if she's mad? Amy whispered. What if she's not? Amanda countered. What if she's hurting just like you are? Amy stared down at the message again. For a moment, the whole world quieted. The drama, the headlines, the trailer, the court date, the comments, the pressure. All of it shrinking until all that remained was one simple truth. They were sisters first. Enemies second. TV characters third. And maybe it was time to remember that. Maybe it was time to reach back. Amy took a deep breath, wiped her face with her sleeve, and finally whispered, "Okay, I'll call her." But just as she pressed Tammy's name on the screen, her phone buzzed again. Another notification. Another punch to the gut. This one from a tabloid. Amy Slayton's new husband arrested. Full story inside. Amanda read the headline, then exhaled through her teeth. "Girl, this ain't just a storm," she said. "This is a whole damn tornado season." Amy's voice broke into a whisper. "I know." She hit call. The phone rang.
Once. Twice. 3 times.
And then, "Hello?" Tammy answered. The moment Tammy's voice came through the speaker, Amy felt her breath catch. It had been days since they talked. Real talking, not the hollow, cold one-word answers they'd been throwing at each other lately. For a second, neither of them said anything. Just breathing.
Tense.
Careful. 2 sisters standing on the edge of something fragile. Then Tammy exhaled shakily. "Amy."
I'm sorry.
Amy closed her eyes. The words hit her harder than she expected. Tammy didn't apologize often, not because she didn't feel sorry, but because pride was her armor, and she wore it like metal. For what? Amy whispered, though she already knew. "For everything," Tammy said quietly.
For the things I said.
"For that stupid fight.
For hurting you.
For making things worse." Amy felt her throat tighten. She leaned back in her chair, staring up at the ceiling. "Tammy, why'd you say it?" she finally asked, her voice small, raw. "Why'd you call me a deadbeat?" There was a pause. A long one. Amy could hear Tammy sniffing on the other end. "Because I was mad," Tammy admitted. "And when I get mad, I don't think. I just hit where it hurts." Amy's eyes burned. "That don't make it okay." "I know," Tammy whispered. "I know. And I swear, Amy, I didn't mean it. Not even for a second. You're a damn good mom. Better than me. Better than most people I know." Amy swallowed hard. Hearing it mattered. More than she wanted to admit. "But Amy," Tammy continued, voice cracking, "I've been scared." "Scared?" Amy frowned. "Of what?" "Of losing you." Amy blinked. Tammy continued, struggling to get the words out. "You're my sister. My best friend. My person. And lately it feels like the world keeps pulling us apart. Show, stress, your life, my life. And then that fight, and I panicked." Amy looked at the floor, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Tammy, I ain't going nowhere." Tammy let out a shaky laugh. "Well, you could have fooled me." Even Amanda, listening quietly from the doorway, softened at the sound. Amy wiped her face, steadying her voice. "We're sisters. We're allowed to mess up. Lord knows we've done enough of that." That made Tammy snort. "Girl, if messing up was an Olympic sport, we'd both have gold medals." Amy laughed through the tears. Typical Tammy, always sneaking humor in when things got heavy. But then Tammy's tone shifted again. "Amy,
I didn't just call to apologize," she said.
I saw something online." Amy stiffened instantly. "About Jeremy?" "Yeah." The room felt like it tilted. Amy held the phone tighter. Her chest squeezed like someone was pulling a rope around it. What did you see? She asked quietly. They're saying he got arrested, Tammy said, gentle now, cautious. And there's pictures. Headlines. All kinds of crap. Amy swallowed, her voice trembling. It's true.
Tammy didn't gasp, didn't yell,
Didn't judge. She just breathed out softly. Oh, Amy. For the first time since the news broke, Amy didn't feel alone. Tammy continued. You okay? No, Amy admitted. Not really. What happened? Amy hesitated, but Tammy's voice softened even more. Amy, you can tell me. I ain't gonna attack you. Not this time. So Amy told her. Not everything, not the deepest fears, but enough. The argument, the flashing lights, the arrest, the humiliation, the kids crying, the neighbors staring, the way her hands wouldn't stop shaking afterward, the way the world already had a headline before she had a chance to breathe. Tammy listened to every word.
No interruptions. No judgment.
Just quiet understanding. When Amy finally stopped, there was silence again. Then Tammy said, You don't deserve that. Her voice wasn't angry. It was protective.
Fierce. Sister-like.
You've been through enough, Amy, Tammy continued. You need peace. You need safety. You need people who lift you up, not drag you down. Amy sniffed. I know, and if he don't get his act together, Tammy added slowly, then he ain't the man for you. Amy's lip trembled. I just wanted a normal life. Tammy gently replied. We ain't normal, girl. We never have been. But that don't mean you can't have a good one. Amy let out a wet laugh. Tammy? Yeah. Thank you for calling. Thank you, Tammy answered. For answering. Then Tammy said something she hadn't said in months. I love you. Amy shut her eyes, her voice breaking. I love you too. They stayed on the phone like that, quiet but connected. Two sisters trying to stitch themselves back together after years of hurt. Outside, the sun dipped lower over Dixon. Inside the Slayton house, something long broken finally started to mend. The hours after the arrest crawled by with a heaviness Amy hadn't felt in years. It was the kind of weight that didn't just sit on her chest. It pressed into her ribs, her thoughts, even the rhythm of her breathing. She kept replaying the moment she got the call, the way her stomach dropped before she even heard the full story, as if her body knew the truth before her mind caught up. Her house felt different now. Too quiet. Too still. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic, even the wind against the window seemed louder, sharper, as if the world itself had shifted into a harsher frequency. Amy sat on the couch with her phone clutched in both hands, scrolling, refreshing, scrolling again, reading comments she knew she shouldn't read, but couldn't stop looking at. Everyone had an opinion about her life. Everyone had a theory. Everyone had a judgment ready to fire. But none of them were inside her heart, the place where hope and heartbreak collided like two storms fighting for control. She kept thinking about her boys, about what she would tell them, about how she had promised herself, promised them, and promised her sister that she would never again let chaos seep into their lives. And yet here it was, knocking on her door louder than ever. Amy pulled her knees to her chest, trying to hold herself together, trying to breathe through the sting in her eyes. It wasn't just embarrassment. It wasn't just anger. It was fear, raw, unfiltered fear, that everything she had been rebuilding was now sitting on the edge of collapse. And the world was watching. She finally opened her front camera, stared at her tired face, wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of her hoodie, and pressed record. Not because she wanted attention, but because she didn't want lies to speak for her anymore. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. She wasn't defending him. She wasn't excusing anything. She was simply trying to survive the truth. And in that moment, with millions waiting for her next move, Amy realized she wasn't just addressing the internet. She was speaking to herself, telling her own heart what it needed to hear. That she would get through this. That she wouldn't break again. That her kids deserved her strength, even on the days she felt shattered. Little did she know, that video would ignite a storm bigger than anything the Slayton family had faced yet. As the sun melted into the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and fading fire orange, Amy finally put her phone down. She had spoken her truth, but the world's reaction was only beginning to unfold. Notifications burst onto her screen like sparks from an electrical wire, relentless, chaotic, impossible to keep up with. Some comments were kind. Most were not. People debated her every word, twisted her message, questioned her choices, her strength, even her ability to protect her children. The noise grew louder and louder until it became a constant roar in her ears, drowning out even her own thoughts. She walked into the kitchen and gripped the counter, trying to ground herself. The cool surface beneath her fingertips was the only steady thing in her world right now. She took a shaky breath, then another, reminding herself she had survived harder days, days when she couldn't even stand on her own, days when she thought food was her only comfort, days when she felt like her body was a cage she could never escape. But this was a different kind of battle. This one wasn't against her weight, or her past, or her doubts. This was a battle against the life she thought she had finally rebuilt, a life she believed was safe, stable, and grounded. Her sister Tammy called again, her voice softer this time, calmer, like a steady hand reaching through a storm. "Amy, you don't gotta talk about this online if you don't want to. You don't owe nobody nothing." But Amy sighed, pressing her forehead against the cabinet door. "Maybe I don't, but people already talking. They telling stories that ain't true. If I stay quiet, they gonna write the whole narrative for me." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was understanding. Because Tammy knew exactly what that felt like. Being misunderstood. Being judged. Being torn apart by strangers who only saw clips of your worst moments. "You got us," Tammy whispered.
Me. Chris.
"Amanda, we ain't going nowhere." And for the first time that day, Amy felt the tightness in her chest loosen just a little. She wasn't alone. Even if the world was burning around her, even if her marriage was crumbling, even if people online were tearing her apart, she had her family. The family that had weathered storms with her since childhood. The family that had carried her through addiction, trauma, heartbreak, hospital beds, and tear-soaked nights. Family wasn't perfect. Family wasn't quiet. Family wasn't easy. But it was real. And it was hers. She stepped into the living room, picked up a toy car her son had left behind, and held it gently in her hands. The plastic felt light, almost weightless, but it meant everything. It reminded her why she kept fighting. Not for the comments. Not for the cameras. Not for the rumors.
For them.
For the two little hearts that depended on her strength. Amy closed her eyes and whispered a promise to herself, a promise she had made before, but now felt deeper than ever. No matter what happens next, I will not let this break me. Little did she know, the next chapter was already on its way, and it would push her farther than she ever thought she could go. Night settled over Dixon, Kentucky, like a heavy blanket. The house was finally quiet, the boys asleep, the notifications silenced, the chaos momentarily pushed outside the walls. But Amy couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed, the soft glow of a small lamp casting shadows across her face. Shadows that looked a little too much like the worries she carried. Her fingers traced the hem of her blanket as her mind replayed everything, the arrest, the headlines, the comments, the judgment, the fear. Her life had always been public, the cameras, the episodes, the social media posts. But this level of exposure felt raw, unprotected, like someone had taken her private pain and turned it into a spectacle. And yet she knew she had to face tomorrow. Not because she wanted to, but because someone had to stand steady for the boys. They were too young to understand the world collapsing around them, but old enough to feel when something wasn't right. Across the room, her phone lit up again. A text from Amanda. "You eating anything tonight, sis?" Amy stared at the screen. It was such a simple question, but there was history in it. Years of watching each other slip into old habits whenever life became too heavy. Amy typed slowly. "I'm trying." Seconds later, another message blinked in. "Trying ain't enough. Come over tomorrow. I'll cook. We'll talk." And then, no cameras. No pressure.
Just family.
Amy felt a small, unexpected warmth bloom in her chest. She didn't realize until that moment how much she needed someone else to take control, just for a day, so she could breathe. She set the phone down and walked to the bedroom window. Outside, the neighborhood was still. A porch light flickered. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Life went on, quietly, indifferently, no matter how loud the world inside her felt. Then a thought hit her, a fear she hadn't said aloud yet. What if this arrest, this scandal, changed everything? What if producers shifted the storyline? What if her reputation never recovered? What if the show portrayed her as unstable? What if she lost opportunities, respect, or, in the worst version of her imagination, custody battles? The idea made her knees weaken. She placed a hand on the window, steadying herself. "I can't lose my boys," she whispered into the empty room. Not after everything she had fought for. Not after losing herself and finding herself so many times. Behind her, the house creaked quietly, settling into the night. But the creak felt like a reminder. This life, this home, this fragile stability could slip away if she didn't fight for it. With a heavy breath, Amy sank back onto her bed. Tonight, she allowed the tears to come. Not dramatic, not explosive, but soft and exhausted. They slid down her cheeks like the release of a pressure valve she'd held closed too long. She cried quietly. She cried honestly. But most importantly, she cried in a way that promised she would rise again. Because deep inside her chest, beneath the fear and noise, there was still a spark, small but stubborn. A spark that had carried her from 400 pounds to motherhood. From self-doubt to self-worth. A spark that whispered, "You survived worse. You can survive this too." Tomorrow would come. The world would still be watching. Questions would still be waiting. But for now, she let herself rest. The first pale fingers of dawn crept through the blinds, spilling cold light across the carpeted floor. Amy stirred, groaning softly, weighed down by the residue of restless sleep. The quiet of the house felt different in the daylight, sharper, heavier, more real. The boys' rooms were empty now, their laughter and chaos yet to begin, but the silence pressed against her chest like a reminder. She was alone with her thoughts. She rose slowly, her body protesting in familiar ways, the ache of muscles long neglected, the pull of joints that had carried her through so much. She made her way to the kitchen, the floorboards groaning under each step, and poured herself a cup of coffee. Steam curled into the air, carrying the faint smell of roasted beans, grounding her in the present. She wrapped her hands around the mug, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers. For a moment, she closed her eyes, letting herself simply exist in that small ritual. Then came the flood again, headlines, whispers, phone notifications, a tidal wave threatening to sweep her under. Her mind raced, replaying the arrest over and over, dissecting every word, every angle, every possible way the narrative could spin. She hated how quickly public opinion could become a storm, tearing through her life like it owned the place. She hated how helpless she felt, even though she'd spent years learning to survive under scrutiny. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from a producer, official, polite, but distant. "Need your statement for filming tomorrow. We'll cover everything." Amy stared at it. The words blurred. Cover everything? What did that even mean? Did they want her to explain herself or just package her vulnerability for the cameras? She felt a tightening in her chest. She wanted to scream, to throw the phone, to run. But there was the spark again, stubborn, pulsing, refusing to let her crumble completely. She took a deep breath, inhaling the sharp morning air that filtered through the cracked window. Slowly, she typed, "I'll do it, but not today. I need my family first." The reply came almost instantly. "Understood. Take care of yourself. See you tomorrow." Amy sank into a chair, staring at the message like it was a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. She thought of Amanda, waiting with a warm meal, waiting with no judgment, waiting with a hand she could grasp when the world felt too heavy. She remembered the boys' small, trusting faces, unaware of the weight pressing down on their mother. They would wake soon, with cries, with questions, with their usual chaos. And she would have to be steady. She would have to be the anchor in the midst of their storm, even as her own storm raged inside. Amy's eyes drifted to the family photo on the fridge. The boys' smiles were radiant, untainted by the world's harshness. Her own face, captured years ago, showed the first flickers of strength she'd found in herself. She traced her finger over the glass, a silent vow passing through her mind. She would protect them. She would survive this. She would rise. The smell of pancakes wafted in through the open kitchen door. Amanda, ever punctual, ever reliable. Amy felt a small, almost guilty smile tug at her lips. She hadn't realized how desperately she needed this. A normal moment, a shared meal, the quiet comfort of someone who understood her without judgment. By the time the boys tumbled down the stairs, running and laughing, Amy felt herself settle into something like peace. The world outside was still unpredictable, still unforgiving, still watching. But inside these walls, for this morning, she had control. She had warmth. She had family. And in that fleeting sanctuary, she remembered what it truly meant to fight, not with anger or bitterness, but with presence, with love, with the small, stubborn spark that refused to be snuffed out. She lifted a fork, cut into the pancake Amanda had made, and for the first time in what felt like months, she let herself believe, even if just for a moment, that she could face tomorrow. The morning stretched on with the soft insistence of routine. The boys played noisily in the living room, their laughter bouncing off the walls, a soundtrack of innocence that both comforted and reminded Amy of all she had to protect. She moved through the motions of breakfast with Amanda by her side, the chatter light but steady, like a lifeline keeping her tethered to reality. There were no cameras, no production schedules, no prying eyes, just the quiet solidity of family. Amanda's presence was grounding. She didn't offer advice unless asked, didn't push or prod. She simply existed as a steady hand, a voice of calm amid Amy's internal storm. The conversation drifted from mundane topics, the boys' schoolwork, plans for the week, to quieter admissions. Amy found herself confessing fears she hadn't spoken aloud to anyone, the shame, the anxiety, the fear of losing control. Amanda listened, nodding, her gaze unwavering, her empathy unspoken but deeply felt. By mid-morning, Amy felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. The storm hadn't vanished, not by any means, but she could breathe again. She could plan her next steps, however uncertain they might be. There was talk of legal counsel, of statements and public appearances, but for now, those were words on the horizon, distant and intangible. Right now, the focus was survival, emotional survival, the kind that came from shared meals, soft laughter, and the simple act of being present with people who truly cared. She glanced at the boys, who were sprawled across the floor with crayons and paper, immersed in their own worlds. The innocence of their focus cut through the heaviness inside her, reminding her that life didn't pause for scandal or fear. Life moved forward, messy, loud, and unpredictable, and she had to move with it, not against it. Later, Amanda helped Amy tidy up the kitchen, and in the quiet, unspoken moments between washing dishes and stacking plates, Amy felt something she hadn't felt in weeks: clarity. She knew the cameras would return, the questions would come, the world outside would continue to scrutinize. But she also knew this: she had survived before, against odds that seemed insurmountable. She had survived herself. And she could survive this. By the time the boys' laughter had faded into an afternoon nap, Amy sat by the window again, watching the soft sway of trees in the gentle breeze. The sunlight cut through the blinds, scattering patterns across the floor, and for the first time in what felt like months, she allowed herself to imagine a life beyond the headlines. Not a life untouched by struggle, but a life in which she could still find moments of peace, moments of love, moments where the spark inside her burned bright enough to guide her through anything. And in that quiet afternoon, Amy realized something essential. The world outside could wait. The cameras, the scrutiny, the judgment, they could wait. Because she had something more immediate, more important, more unbreakable, her family, her love, and her own stubborn will to survive. For the first time that day, she smiled, small, fragile, and tentative, but real. And she allowed herself to hope. Not recklessly, not blindly, but deliberately, like someone reaching for a lifeline in the middle of a storm, trusting that they could hold on long enough to see the clouds break. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The world would still be watching. Questions would still demand answers. But Amy had found her footing again, her center in the chaos, and in that moment, she knew she could face anything because she wasn't facing it alone. She had survived worse. And now, she would rise again. The late afternoon sun slanted through the curtains, painting golden streaks across the living room. Amy sat on the couch, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, the warmth seeping into her palms. The boys were quietly coloring at the coffee table, their crayons clicking softly against paper, their laughter reduced to the occasional hum of concentration. For a fleeting moment, the world felt simple, almost ordinary, a reprieve from the storm that had gripped her life for weeks. But Amy knew the calm was temporary. Outside, the world was already buzzing with whispers. Social media notifications pinged intermittently on her phone, news alerts flashing headlines that twisted her reality into a spectacle for millions. She hadn't opened them yet, and she wasn't sure she wanted to. The temptation to see the commentary, to understand how people were spinning her story, was there, but so was the wisdom she had earned through years of struggle. Sometimes survival meant turning away, even if just for a few hours. Amanda glanced at her from the kitchen doorway, a soft smile tugging at her lips. "Want me to make snacks for the boys?" she asked. Amy nodded, appreciating the small gesture. It was these quiet acts, unforced, unpressured, that reminded her she wasn't alone, that reminded her there were people in her corner who saw her as human, not just as a character on a screen. As she sipped her tea, Amy's mind wandered back to the events that had brought her here. The arrest, the headlines, the endless judgment. It all felt surreal, like a movie she was trapped inside of, only with stakes far higher than any plotline she had ever seen on television. She remembered the night she had cried herself to sleep, the small spark inside her chest refusing to die. That spark had carried her through surgeries, public scrutiny, and personal loss. It had survived her lowest points. And it was still there. A soft murmur from the boys pulled her out of her thoughts. They were talking in hushed voices about a game they were creating on the paper, their imaginations spinning worlds far removed from Amy's reality. She watched them, her heart tightening with a mix of love and fear. Love for the pure joy they brought into her life, and fear for the challenges that lay ahead, the scrutiny, the legal hurdles, the public narrative that threatened to overshadow every quiet, precious moment at home. Amanda returned with a tray of snacks, setting it gently on the table. "Here," she said, "little armor for the troops." The small humor in her voice drew a soft laugh from Amy. It was a laugh that had felt impossible in recent days, but now it came naturally, unforced, a testament to the fragile but undeniable resilience growing inside her. Amy realized then that strength didn't always roar. Sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes it was a shared cup of tea, a soft laugh, the willingness to be present in the moments that truly mattered. The world could continue to watch, to judge, to speculate. She could not control that. But she could control this. These walls, this love, this presence. She could be the steady anchor for her boys, the calm in the chaos, the keeper of the spark that refused to be extinguished. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the room, Amy felt a rare sense of clarity. Tomorrow, the cameras, the questions, the judgment would return. But tonight, she had reclaimed something that no headline could take, a small, unshakable peace, a reminder that even in the most turbulent storms, the heart could still find a place to breathe, to rest, and to hope. And for Amy, that was enough to rise. The evening arrived quietly, the sky a soft wash of purples and pinks, and for a moment, the world outside seemed to pause. Amy sat in the living room. The boys sprawled on the carpet with their toys scattered around them, creating little islands of color and chaos. The weight of the day had settled over her like a familiar cloak, heavy but manageable. She sipped her tea slowly, each swallow grounding her, reminding her that she was still here, still capable, still breathing. Amanda moved around the room with the ease of someone who had been there before, picking up stray crayons, refilling snack plates, speaking in that calm, steady tone that reminded Amy that life could feel ordinary, even amidst turmoil. "You okay?" Amanda asked, her voice soft, almost hesitant. Amy nodded, though her eyes betrayed the storm that still lingered behind her calm exterior. "I will be," Amy whispered, more to herself than to Amanda. The words were a promise, a vow, a small rebellion against the fear that had taken residence in her chest for days. She thought of the arrest, the judgment, the relentless gaze of the cameras, and yet, sitting here with her family, it all seemed momentarily distant. Not gone, not forgotten, but distant enough to allow her to breathe. The boys began to chatter about the plans they were making for tomorrow, their voices rising and falling with enthusiasm. Amy listened, letting their energy wash over her, reminding her of the world outside her own fears. She realized that her life, her children, her home, her family, was more than the sum of the headlines. It was a living, breathing entity that needed her presence, not her panic. Amanda settled onto the couch beside her, nudging her lightly. "You've been carrying so much," she said. "It's okay to let someone else hold it for a while." Amy felt a lump form in her throat. She knew she had been carrying everything alone, the shame, the fear, the pressure of being constantly watched. But in this moment, she allowed herself to accept the support, to lean into the quiet strength Amanda offered. As twilight deepened, the boys' energy finally waned, and they curled up on the couch with blankets, their small snores filling the room like gentle music. Amy watched them, her chest tightening with a mixture of love and fierce protectiveness. She knew the world could be cruel, that judgment could seep into every corner of her life, but she also knew this. She would fight. She would survive. She would rise. Night settled in again, quieter this time, not as oppressive as before. Amy felt a sense of fragile victory. She had faced another day, had protected her family from the storm outside, had allowed herself to be human without fear of spectacle. It wasn't a complete triumph, but it was a start. And in the soft glow of the evening, Amy realized something profound. Resilience didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it sat quietly on the couch with a cup of tea, watching the children she loved sleep, knowing that surviving today was enough to face tomorrow. With a deep, steadying breath, Amy finally allowed herself to sink into the couch, feeling the warmth of family surrounding her. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, yes. But tonight, she had reclaimed her peace. And in that, she found strength, quiet, enduring, and unbreakable. The house grew still, the only sounds the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood. Amy sat in the dim glow of the living room lamp, tracing the rim of her mug absent-mindedly. The boys had finally slipped into a deep sleep, their small bodies rising and falling in rhythmic innocence, unaware of the turbulence that lingered just beyond their bedroom door. The quiet was both soothing and disquieting, a reminder that while the world rested, she remained vigilant. Her thoughts drifted, uninvited and relentless, circling the events of the past days. The arrest, the media frenzy, the pointed looks and whispered judgments, it all felt unreal at times, like a storm she was watching through a glass pane, separated but not untouched. Yet, unlike before, she no longer felt entirely powerless. She had her family, she had Amanda, and she had herself, a self she had rebuilt countless times from the ashes of fear and doubt. Amy's phone buzzed softly on the coffee table. A message from her lawyer. Meeting rescheduled for tomorrow morning. Prepare your notes. She stared at the words, feeling the familiar prickling of anxiety, but beneath it, a steadier sensation began to emerge, determination. She had weathered storms like this before. She had faced judgments that cut deeper than any headline ever could. And she had survived. Amanda appeared in the doorway, silhouetted by the faint light from the hallway. "I think it's time for a little self-care," she said gently. "You've been carrying too much. How about a bath?" Amy hesitated, then nodded. The idea of immersing herself in warm water, of letting her muscles relax and the weight of the day wash away, felt like a lifeline. As she sank into the bath later, the water enveloping her like a protective cocoon, Amy allowed herself to release the tension she had held in every fiber of her being. Tears came, slow and cleansing, but this time they were not born of despair alone. They carried relief, exhaustion, and a quiet gratitude for having made it through another day intact. The spark inside her chest, that stubborn ember of resilience, glowed a little brighter. Emerging from the bath, wrapped in a soft towel, Amy glanced at the small calendar on the counter. Tomorrow would bring meetings, cameras, questions, and the world's gaze. But tonight, she had claimed a fragment of herself, a fragment the world could not touch. She dressed in simple, comfortable clothes and returned to the living room, where Amanda had already tidied the space and placed a mug of tea on the table. Sitting across from her sister, Amy felt a sense of quiet triumph. The day had been hard, yes, but she had survived it, with her dignity, her family, and her spirit intact. Amanda smiled, a knowing look that said everything words could not. Amy returned it, a small curve of the lips, fragile yet full of promise. She watched the shadows stretch across the room as the night deepened, and she allowed herself a rare thought. She could face tomorrow. She could handle the scrutiny, the questions, the relentless demands of life in the public eye. Because for the first time in a long while, she remembered something essential. Survival wasn't just about enduring. It was about reclaiming moments, however small, where life felt like her own. And in that quiet, dimly lit room, with the soft clatter of tea and the muted rhythm of the house around her, Amy felt the spark inside her burn steadily, bright enough to guide her through whatever storms the world had yet to throw. She would rise. She always had, and she always would. Night deepened over Dixon, casting a cool, heavy shadow across the house. Amy sat on the couch, curled beneath a soft blanket, the boys long asleep, their small snores a lullaby she clung to. Outside, the world seemed to settle into its usual rhythm: distant cars, a neighbor's dog barking, the rustle of wind through the trees. Yet inside her chest, the storm had not fully passed. It lingered, quiet but persistent, a reminder that peace was never permanent. She sipped her tea slowly, savoring the warmth that spread through her hands and up her arms. The events of the past weeks pressed against her consciousness like an uninvited shadow: the arrest, the media scrutiny, the endless judgments. But tonight there was a difference. Tonight, she allowed herself to simply be. She didn't need to explain, to justify, to perform. She didn't need to be strong in the way the world demanded. She only needed to exist, human, flawed, resilient. Amanda entered the room quietly, holding a small tray with cookies and a second cup of tea. "I thought you might need this," she said softly, placing the tray beside Amy. There was no lecture, no admonishment, only presence. And in that simple act, Amy felt the weight in her chest ease slightly. Support like this was rare, and she understood, even if only fleetingly, how much it mattered. Amy's thoughts drifted to the boys. They were asleep, dreaming of worlds far removed from the chaos that threatened to invade their lives. Their innocence was fragile, but it was also powerful. It reminded her why she had to endure, why she had to remain steadfast. They needed her, not just her physical presence, but the steady flame of reassurance that no matter what the world threw at them, they were safe, loved, and cherished. She thought of the days ahead. Meetings with producers, statements to be prepared, cameras ready to capture her every move. Anxiety fluttered in her stomach, a familiar, unwelcome companion. But beneath it, a quiet strength had begun to take root. She remembered the nights she had spent doubting herself, the moments when fear threatened to paralyze her, and she realized that she had always found a way through. That spark inside her, small and stubborn, had survived every test thrown her way. And it would survive this too. Amanda sat down beside her, passing a cookie across the blanket. "You've done more than survive," she said. "You've carried all of this with grace, even when it didn't feel like it." Amy took the cookie, letting the words sink in.
Grace.
A word that had seemed unreachable in recent days, yet here it was, whispered gently into her world. For the first time that night, Amy allowed herself to truly breathe. The panic, the judgment, the scrutiny, they could wait. Tonight, there was tea, cookies, the quiet presence of someone who cared, and the soft rhythm of her boys breathing upstairs.
Tonight she could rest.
Tonight, she could reclaim a piece of herself that the world had tried to consume. And as the darkness outside deepened, Amy felt the spark inside her chest grow warmer, brighter, a guiding light for the challenges yet to come. She knew the world would still demand her strength, would still watch, would still question. But tonight, she had found her center again, and in that, she found something far more valuable. Hope. Hope that she could rise tomorrow. Hope that she could endure. Hope that no matter how heavy the storm, she would never lose the small, unbreakable flame that was hers, the flame that would carry her, always, through the darkest nights. Dawn broke slowly over Dixon, the first thin rays of light spilling into the living room and touching the edges of scattered toys, the faint outline of a forgotten blanket, the silent testimony of a home that had weathered storms and still stood. Amy sat on the couch, wrapped in the comfort of a soft blanket, staring out the window at a world that seemed unchanged, indifferent to the turmoil she had endured. Yet inside her, the world had shifted. She had moved through fear, through scrutiny, through nights that felt unending, and had emerged still standing. The boys stirred upstairs, their small footsteps padding against the floorboards as they began their day, unaware of the weight their mother carried, yet inherently tied to it. Amy took a deep breath, letting the quiet strength of their presence fill her chest. She rose slowly, the familiar ache in her body a reminder of battles fought and survived, and made her way to the kitchen. Sunlight streamed in, cutting through the shadows, casting golden patterns across the floor. It was ordinary, domestic, grounding, and in it, she found her anchor. Amanda appeared at the doorway, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "Ready for another day?" she asked, her tone light but steady. Amy nodded, accepting the cup, feeling the warmth seep into her hands, grounding her in the present. She knew the challenges of today, statements to be made, cameras to face, judgment to endure. But she also knew something more vital. She was no longer facing them alone. She had her family, her allies, and most importantly, herself, a woman tempered by struggle, strengthened by love, and carried forward by an unyielding spark. The boys tumbled into the kitchen, bright-eyed and full of energy, their laughter filling the room like a balm. Amy bent down to greet them, ruffling hair, sharing smiles, anchoring herself in these fleeting moments of joy. These were the fragments of life the cameras could never capture, the glimpses of reality that mattered more than any headline or public opinion. She thought of the arrest, the media attention, the whispers behind her back. The fear that had gripped her so tightly in recent days had not vanished entirely, but it had softened, shaped into a resolve she hadn't felt in years. Survival wasn't just about enduring the chaos. It was about reclaiming herself, piece by piece, moment by moment, in the midst of it. As the morning sun climbed higher, Amy gathered her strength, preparing for what lay ahead. She glanced at Amanda, who offered a small, encouraging smile, and at the boys, whose innocence was both fragile and fiercely protective. In that moment, clarity settled over her like a calm tide. She could face the world, its scrutiny, and its judgment. She could endure because she had endured before. She could rise because rising was not an option. It was a necessity, a testament to all she had survived, all she had loved, all she had fought to protect. And as the first real light of day flooded the kitchen, Amy felt the spark inside her blaze brighter than ever. It was no longer just a flicker of hope. It was a fire of resilience, courage, and unwavering determination. The world would watch. Questions would come. Challenges would test her. But Amy would meet them, steady, present, unbroken. For she had discovered the essential truth. No matter the storm, no matter the judgment, no matter the fear, she would rise. And in rising, she would not just survive, she would live. Fully, fiercely, unapologetically. The day had begun, and with it, Amy stepped into the world once more, carrying her spark into every shadow, ready to face whatever awaited, because she had found the unshakable center within herself. She was ready. She was strong. And she would rise again, always.